Hi, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Three and a Possible. I'm Monica Rhodes, and I am very happy to introduce this new video series. As we know, histories are often multi layered, and the name of this show is no exception. So, if you are a spades player, then you know when you're predicting how many books you're going to win in that hand. So, that's where a part of the possible comes in because you're predicting the future. This show also represents the essence of cultural preservation, which is just not a conversation with the past and present, but it's predictive in nature. And then finally, through this series, I am looking to reconnect with my ecosystem of preservation practitioners and others. So it's a big ecosystem, lots going on. And I'm using this as a way to have a very informal, casual conversations where I ask three and possibly four questions. So without further ado, I am joined here with Dr. Kwesi Daniels, who is the head of the architecture department at Tuskegee University. Kwesi's professional experiences ranges across various disciplines, including historic preservation, architecture, sustainability management, and urban geography. He developed the historic preservation program at Tuskegee University within the Robert R. Taylor School of Architecture and Construction Science. The goal of the program is to train architecture and construction science management students to handle the nuances of historic properties using technology like laser scanning, 3D printing, drones, VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality. This preservation work has expanded the contemporary resources of Tuskegee University into African American communities in Selma, Montgomery, Birmingham, and Tuskegee. His students are currently working to preserve the Armstrong School in Macon, Alabama, a Tuskegee's rural school model building and a precursor to the Tuskegee Rosenwald Community School program. Dr. Daniels earned a Bachelor's of Architecture and a Master's of Architecture from Tuskegee University and the University of Illinois at Chicago, and a Master's of Science in Sustainability Management from Columbia University. In 2020, Dr. Daniels earned his PhD in urban geography from Temple University. His doctoral research focused on the positive and negative social impact universities can have on communities and on their campuses, particularly communities of color. So, Kwesi, welcome to the conversation. I want to jump right on in and ask you, how did you get into the work that you're doing and you're leading at Tuskegee?
Man, I feel like that old man, oh, back in my day. I actually was exposed to preservation when I was entering my third year in architecture with the Historic American Building Survey.
Hmm.
And we were documenting African American sites around North Philadelphia. Amazing, amazing experience. And I didn't feel like it was a fit for me. I didn't realize how unique it was to be documenting only African American sites. But I'll be honest, I didn't see anybody who looked like me. And I was like, this can't be for me. So I was like, well, I want to do architecture. Like, that's not what I came here to do. I'm going to do architecture. At that time, I thought there was a difference between the two. And it really, it wasn't until, you fast forward when I was working on my dissertation, I had done some preservation work, previous work at Tuskegee and in North Philadelphia with the Joe Frazier boxing gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, dope brother.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was working on my dissertation and my goal was to try to figure out how to solve challenges around gentrification. And I walked in, with this bright idea that, I'm about to change the world with this research, right? And I'm watching the time tick away and I'm watching the neighborhood change. And it after a conversation with one of the people that I was working with, one of my partners, he mentioned what types of spaces were disappearing. And I immediately said, preservation could be that solution.
Mm.
And from there, it became what I felt was my calling, because as I said, I when I first got started, I didn't I didn't really push myself in this direction. I was pushed in this direction at many times, and it's just that the light bulb went off. And then being back at Tuskegee at the same time while this is happening, we're looking at our campus. We see these buildings that have a need. We see all these challenges that need to be addressed. And I said, we need to go hard on preservation, and we've not turned back since.
I like that. And Kwesi, I didn't know that we both got our start in preservation in Pennsylvania. So I did this Preserve America program for the state, and documenting African American sites around Pennsylvania, excluding Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So I was all out in the, Indiana, Scranton, Williamsport, all of those places doing the work.
I'll take Philly.
Yeah. So you took all of that, back to Tuskegee. Can you talk a little bit about the campus and what you're up to right now?
Yeah, so our campus, I mean, it's a beautiful campus. It's a great shot of the campus. Most of the buildings that you're looking at were the students made the bricks and used those bricks to build them under the guidance of the first professionally trained African American architects in the country, starting with Robert R. Taylor to Walter T. Bailey to William Sidney Pittman, Wallace Rayfield. I mean, these literally are the who's who of African American architecture and the civil rights movement. Many of these architects played a major role in designing buildings and spaces that were eventually used during that movement.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at how not only can we preserve the campus and that legacy, but also get us linked into our historical legacy of our students, not only building, well, at the time we were building the buildings, now we're looking at how we preserve them. But our students.
Pause for a second, though, Kwesi. You said so the students built the buildings.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Dr. Booker T. Washington was the first principal of our campus, and one of his philosophies was learning to do by doing. He graduated from Hampton Institute and was given a philosophy of educating the head, the hand, and the heart, which was really this philosophy you see in a lot of places. MIT, for example, their education of the head and the hand. So that's not unique. But for Washington coming to Tuskegee, he looked around and saw that I have these dilapidated buildings because he had acquired an old plantation, and in the process of teaching students their lessons, they were also realizing we got holes in these buildings that we need to fix. And that's what prompted this idea of, rather than it be a separation between the lesson, or the theory and the application, we can combine the two. One of his favorite phrases, and I'll reference the map behind you, we'll spend a whole lot of time talking about rivers and streams and water bodies on a map or in a book, but we'll never go to the river, stream, or water body that's behind the schoolhouse and talk about all of those things. And so what you see, if you go back to the image of the campus, what's amazing is we're the only college campus that's a National Historic Landmark. So to be in an environment where you get to preserve a national treasure, and it's a space that's the only one that I'm aware of that the architecture program designed it and the architecture students built it using architectural principles, makes it not only very unique, but I say, a clear example of American architecture. It's a clear example of sustainability.
Yeah. And
so you actually, when you look at those buildings, they're actually not buildings. They're actually a curriculum. This is a working curriculum where you can see brick masonry, you can see tinsmithing, you can see carpentry, agriculture, I mean, the original chapel was built by the students, and they did everything from laying the electricity, where we had one of the very first buildings in Macon County, and I'd say Alabama, to be electrified. And it was because the first educated African American electrical engineer came to Tuskegee in about 1900 and electrified the campus, and we became a power plant. So for us, historic preservation is aligned with that trajectory, that legacy of education that says, oh, we don't just produce things to teach you and then we disappear. No, we're producing things that you can take out into the community in order to meet the needs of the local community. And so this image here with us doing window restoration, these are community residents. Two of them are community residents and two are students. The woman, Miss Elizabeth Sims, she had what's called a Tuskegee Rosenwald Community School and wanted to restore it. And we said, well, the most important thing you have to do is address the windows. And had no idea what we were going to be doing. I contacted a window restoration expert out of Florida. And when I told him Tuskegee, he said, you mean like where George Washington Carver went? I was like, yeah. He said, man, he saved my family. He saved my community from the bull weevil. And I always wanted to give back to him. And in 8 months, he stayed with us, teaching us how to restore windows. And so that turned into this amazing project that was in 2008. You fast forward 10 years, we're doing it on a much grander scale and looking at the buildings on our campus to see how do we restore them? How do we teach architecture through the trades so that there's no disconnect from working with your hands and educating your head and understanding the education of the heart is of giving to society, giving to humanity, giving to the community around you, which is all Booker T. Washington was doing. And that's why Tuskegee was able to be not only a trendsetter, but a trailblazer in so many, many ways. And so that's the fun we're having every day.
Man, that's pretty incredible. Tuskegee is indeed a special place. I was just on with Joy, Superintendent Kennard, from the National Park there, and she was sharing about Booker T. Washington, the Oaks, which is managed by the Park Service, but on Tuskegee's campus. And then just talking about the cultural legacy of the place. And Benjamin Davis came up as one of those examples of the work with ROTC. And we also talked about George Washington Carver's impact. So it's just it's a place where uninterrupted, you had this beautiful mix of all of these fields coming in to have a focused impact on the Tuskegee, the city of Tuskegee and surrounding communities. And you're continuing that legacy. Why is that? Why do you think that's so important for communities to be involved in this work, for students to see preservation as the future?
So, as I mentioned, for me, working on my research and knowing the challenges that African American communities face around gentrification, and all that is there's a migration of money back into urban areas where African Americans have lived for about 3 to 4 generations in depressed states. And so what I find with preservation is it provides some answers that it's for children who've grown up in environments where you see a building, it's dilapidated, and you believe that because it's dilapidated, your community has no value. Well, that's not true. Sometimes all it takes is a little bit of paint, a little bit of, as my mother would say, a little bit of elbow grease. All it takes is for you to get engaged. And that window that you thought was broken and was a problem, that's actually a window that you can fix. And now when you fix that window, you can start to engage in economic development. You can engage in growing your community, making your community beautiful. You can do the work that you not only would be proud of, but everyone would be proud of. And as a collective, you can increase the value of your own land. So you don't need someone else to come back in and bring an influx of massive amounts of dollars. You can actually bring up your own value without having someone else dictate the terms for how your community will be shaped. And so I find that in our communities, we have these cultural resources that are as significant as Tuskegee University that may be your grandma's house. That's significant to you. That may be where the first train depot was located. This may be the site where a porter, met in order to make a decision about how they were going to, do a labor union. Like, there are these stories that are unique to these spaces that the only people who know it are the ones that are living there. And so if we push the people out, then we lose all of that cultural rich history about how to survive in really amazing odds that could be used every single day. And so I find that this is important because for our students who come from around the world, I can actually give you something that you can take back, and you can give it to your mother, because your mom is going to say, "Oh, you an architect?" For our students, "Oh, you're an architect. Oh, you make my house. You're going to design my house." You're like, "Yeah, but I only learned how to do skyscrapers." Like, you only know how to do skyscrapers. That doesn't do you any value. I can give you a skill that you don't have to. You can also take to any place in the world and walk into an environment and see, oh, okay, I see you have an old building. I actually have something that I can give. I can trade a service to you, a skill to you for something else. And then I can also move into a space like the Taj Mahal, right? There's a value that's there. I understand that. So I can play in all scales simultaneously and bring architecture to the table. So it doesn't just have to be about drawing. It can also be about touching and understanding the tangible relationships between it and the people around it. And at the very end, it's humanizing. We come as someone trained in architecture. I never learned about the human side of a building. I learned about my side, my ideas about what a building should look like. What I found with preservation is, you can't just walk in a building and do something. You must be introduced to it. We work with civil rights sites. There's one of the buildings, the homes we were in was the Harris House in Montgomery, Alabama, which is on Jackson Street, which is where Dr. King lived when he was preaching at Dexter Avenue King Memorial Church, a Baptist church. So you walk in, Dr. Harris says, walks us around and says, "You see that spot right there? That's where Congressman John Lewis sat when he was here, and he got busted in the head. And this is where the Freedom Riders sat. This, speaking about Benjamin O. Davis, this is where Benjamin O. Davis and the Tuskegee Airmen. This is where they would come and party and have fun up in my dad's man cave today, right? This is where they hung out. I couldn't come up there. I was too young, right?
Yeah, those memories,
stories, narratives, things that make you look at it with a different set of eyes. And so for me, it's beyond just historic preservation. It's cultural preservation. Yeah. Because it's more than just the history. It's the culture, it's the food, it's the talk, it's the conversation, it's the engagement, it's the practices that you did. It's the why of how your community came together. And I find I've been able to share this with students and find connections with kids in, from 6th grade up to, 70, 80-year-old people, because it's something that resonates with all of us.
Yeah. And that's the part of preservation that I don't think gets enough credit for the work that it's doing, right? Like, you read a New York Times article or, something in the journal about how people are thinking about preservation as locking up one building in time forever, or put it in museumifying it in
Mm-hmm.
some way, embalming it in some
Mm-hmm.
way, and not wanting anybody to touch that ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's interesting that the people that are practicing in my ecosystem, this could be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a lot of ways, it's like the idea of what preservation is locked in the past, in the same ways that they're thinking preservation is locking things in the past. I mean, the work of Tuskegee is a great example of, preservationist comes in many different ways, look very different, and it's not about these just about these buildings, and
Mm-hmm.
it's never been about those buildings. So I
Mm-hmm.
think you made a great point with sharing that stories are a key piece to all of this. It drives the conversation. Whenever I used to visit places for work, yeah, people want to show the building, but I would spend all day talking to people about their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody called in to the trust and wanted to talk about something. They're talking about those stories. So spot on, spot on. So with that being said, so now that we talked about the past of preservation, what Tuskegee has done to this cultural continuity that's been central to the work that was before you, that you're currently leading. What is the future looking like? What do you think not only the future of Tuskegee, but more broadly, what skills, what conversations should we be having in the field, or what are we already having that we need to amplify, that we should be talking about and shifting our discussions, our focus, our energies, our funding towards?
Oh man. So if you think about it like as a pyramid, on your base level, I'd say that's your labor, that's your trades, that's your hope crew. That's your realizing I have a whole body of people who have been written off, whether they've been, whether due to mass incarceration, whether it's due to mass unemployment, mass undereducation, or just mass divestment from society because it doesn't vibe with me, or just I haven't figured out where I want to go. Right? That body of people have value. They still bring value to the table. So to me, that's the first layer of investment. You start to pour these skills of how to preserve buildings and spaces into them, they immediately have value again, and they become immediate contributors to a community. That person that you said had no value, the minute they preserve this house, they're not going to break into that house. I'm not about to break the window that I just put in, right? I know this house. When I see a person looking at it and admiring, and they talk about the quality of the work, you know what? For 20 years of my life, people may have written me off and told me I'm nothing. But the minute they looked at my work and talked about it, they said, wow, that's beautiful. That may have been the first time I heard that term beautiful associated with me and my character, right? And so to me, that's like the first level of the future for where we go, not only just in historic preservation, but as a society. The next level becomes a little higher, and that's where we look at how to engage with emerging technologies. One of the beautiful things of starting a brand new program is that we're not rooted in dogma. We're here. We like technology. You tell me, y'all guys, the people are doing something with some drones. We want some drones. People are doing something with some laser scanners. We want some laser scanners. You want something with augmented reality and AR glasses? Yeah, we want some of that too. And we are doing all of that. So
yeah, Kwesi, I was thinking about it. When we first met, when I came down to Tuskegee, y'all had the Park Service down there, and y'all were doing documentation, doing some laser scanning drones. I'm like, okay, all right,
man.
like what, 2017, 28, something like that. It was, yeah,
yeah. We do some guerrilla laser scanning now. Like you like ride around and see a
Yeah.
site. Oh, pull out the equipment real quick, scan real fast because we gotta get this. I mean,
Uh,
we have
just
different
riding around with equipment, just riding around in the back, just in case.
literally. We got. I mean, if people knew what was in the car, you know, it may not be a good thing for some of the places we go. But
Yeah.
we were in Tennessee. Our students, we were at the NOMA conference, and I had a conversation with somebody. Again, this is this research, knowing Black spaces are being transformed. And I said, where's a space that we need to go that most people wouldn't even know about? Can you point me in that direction? And we went there, and we go sit down and eat amazing food in Nashville. It's this Black-owned restaurant in Nashville. And as we get outside to go get some gas, I look around and I notice that the same name that was on the restaurant is on the gas station across the street. It's also on the strip mall across the street. And I'm like, whoa, all three of these places, they're owned by the same Black family. That's deep. Yo, pull out this laser scanner equipment. We got to document this. We got the handheld. Go take that BLK over there and scan that in the front. Go take that RTC out, just right here. Just scan all this real fast. We got to document this, you know.
It's like, so here's something. So I, the first time I started documenting things, it was in Philly. I was in grad school at Penn, and I was taking pictures of this neighborhood, and someone leaned out their window, was like, "Hey, hey!" And I was like, "Hey, how you doing? Like, you working for the internet?" I was like, so it's always funny because people are curious about what you're doing, right? Because it's equipment. Like you're doing something,
Yep.
and it's always a way to have a conversation. So tell me, what did people say when they saw what you had in the trunk?
Whenever we do this, what's that you're doing? Oh, who are y'all? What you work? I mean, I feel real special, you know. Yeah. I mean, if you're just the architect, you just walk up, you stand around. Okay, maybe I take down some notes. No. I done pulled out some equipment. Like we putting some stuff down. And I'm, please, can you not walk over there for a second? Just give me a second real quick. And they're like, oh, what's going on? Well, there's some lasers going around. Lasers? Like, I mean, when you launch the drone, I mean, you want to see some eyes from the children up to the adults. Whoa, like put that,
right.
You put that drone on the ground, launch that thing in the air, and you start taking photos. People get excited.
Yeah.
And the value of coming into a space that everyone may have deemed has no value, and you tell them why you're doing it. I'm documenting this because you have value, and I want the world to know about it. I want people to know this place exists. We went to.
Hold on, I just want to underscore the fact it's like not only documentation, this community has value, but you have value. Your story is important enough for us to document. I mean, that just transforms how people are seeing themselves. Like your history, your identity is valuable, and it deserves to have this technology help us to document and preserve it.
Yes, and when we understand that the technology that we're bringing to the table, I mean, this is expensive technology.
Yeah,
you're scraping around $80,000, $60,000 range.
In the trunk.
Like when I pop my trunk, like, this is some expensive. This is some expensive stuff. The spark that goes off in a student's eyes, right? They're standing in an environment they may have never even stood in. People may have said, "You can't be here." Yet we can be here because we can show you gems. This place is not full of crime and degradation and dilapidation. It's called divestment. It's called lack of attention, lack of focus. So we can go in this space and bring some value to a place that a person may not even have known what kind of value was there. And at the very least, this might be the only documentation. However, if they want to preserve it, we can say this is the first documentation. We can take you from, we document it, now we're going to head and build a virtual model of it. Now we're going to do some stuff with an AR. You give me a QR code and some in a cell phone, man. I bring some people to your spot, right? You now need to start doing some fundraising. You could do some grassroots fundraising because you now have something for people to see. These are the things that I can show people. I can connect with kids. I have a 3D printer. We documented the Booker T. Washington cabin. It was a replica of his cabin, documented it. And I remember telling my kids, do something that people want to steal. Like, what? Well, if it don't get no value, nobody want to steal it, right? So I go to this career fair, and I have the laser scan. I mean, I have all the equipment out. I have the 3D printer there, and I'm printing off a model. I'm like, I'm going to give this to them. And then like halfway through the day, I look around, I can't find my little replica of Dr. Washington's cabin. One of those students that stole my cabin. Man, I felt bad for a second, and I said, wow, that must mean there's real value.
Mm-hmm.
Either they took it because they wanted to take it, or they took it because they thought I was giving it away. I wasn't giving it away. I wanted to keep it.
So Kwesi, this whole conversation is a call out to that student.
Let's call out to that student.
Bring back my cabin.
Bring back my cabin, man. But the things that we get to do, and I get to span. You could not have told me that I could play with technology like I'm playing with right now. And all of it is for the purpose of making spaces that have not received the type of attention get the attention. And we can play with it at whatever level you're comfortable with. So if all you want is a photo, we can do that. If you want to walk through it as if it was restored, you can do that. If you want to get a model of what you have, we can do that as well. You want a QR code you can send everybody to on the internet? Yeah, we work with the internet. We can do that. Whatever you want to do. You know what? Somebody might be on the. Unfortunately, I missed this particular building, but it was a building in Montgomery. An organization was tearing it down, and I said, "Oh man, let me get in there and document it real fast." Equipment had to go in the shop. By the time the day I got the equipment out the shop was a day after they tore the building down. And I was like, oh man, I would have loved to. I wanted to capture that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I got there the day before they tore it down. Now I've documented this. And if you think about the connections, all right, I'll put something out here, the future. We think about people immigrating to certain locations. We think about the separation of being in an environment, a new environment, but you need to connect with an old environment. People that have Alzheimer's, often they can only associate with certain places and spaces and time that bring them back to that memory. What's it look like to come in and document a place, and now that same individual, they wear VR glasses and they're in their home with everything in the same place? Does that calm them down? They don't realize, does that give a level of comfort to that immigrant family that may have migrated from south of the border, and they may, and as far as they know, they're never going to return home. But because we documented their home, we said your home was valuable when they needed that quote unquote fix. They just put these glasses on and they got to go back home. That grandmother who came up and she's 80 years old, hasn't been back to her home country in 30 years. And you've never seen her smile because you didn't realize what was missing was that experience, that smell, that taste, that touch, that look of being back in her hometown, her home. And you give that, and she can see the pictures of her family inside that home. And you see her cry for the first time, right? I mean, there's some things we can do now, and it's in front of us. We don't have to spend lots of money to do it. We can work with you wherever you are to get you where you need to be.
Yeah. And again, as you're talking, I'm like, people underestimate the value of place attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, knowing where we were when certain things happened, knowing
Yep.
what that smell is like, where that creaky board is, because you probably tried to come in the house late and you didn't want to hit that creak, so your parents were here. Like, all these memories that are just tied to place, places, not just houses, cemeteries, places of worship. I don't think we spend enough time there, kind of talking about how connected we are to place.
It's a thing. You want to understand how connected we are to space, to place, you go back and look at what happened at 9/11. There's a reason that the United Nations states that it's a war crime to destroy buildings when there's armed conflict.
Mm.
Being connected to place, you want to understand what that looks like. Talk to someone who's been incarcerated for 20 years and they come back to their neighborhood and they don't recognize anything. There's a dissonance that happens when you're in an environment that this is not how it looked. I know how it looked. There was a grocery store on the block over here. There was a little red house over here. I know the kids aren't there anymore, but I do expect to see the house. Maybe the paint's going to be faded. I expect to see it, even if it's dilapidated, right? There's a dissonance that happens when people come to an environment that used to look a certain kind of way, and they weren't around for that change to take place, or as that change took place. There are a lot of people walking around who have mental health issues. I wouldn't be surprised. I've not looked at the research on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of that has to do with I'm walking around spaces I don't recognize. I can't place myself anywhere. So if I can't place myself in space, what value do I have? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Preservation actually has tools that have been developed for decades, for centuries, that can meet so many challenges if we really just recognize that every building is an existing building after it gets put up. And so if we don't spend our time teaching our kids how to work with an existing building, then we're going to tear it down too fast.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to lose. Everybody understands money, because if you don't have any in your pocket, you need it. Money, right? So if you don't have the money, but you need the money, well, let's look at how much is sweat equity? What's social capital look like?
Mm-hmm.
You bring people we preserve the Shiloh Rosenwald Community School. We had people who all they could bring was orange juice, some biscuits, and some jelly on a brisk Saturday morning. We had kids who all they could do was lift some planks of wood. We had administrators who rarely get out and work with their hands. And then we had seasoned people who work with their hands all the time. We were all coming together. We were able to hire some people to do the work. We had alums of the school who had not been back to this school in 30 years ride by, see the school open, and come inside and have a family reunion. When these are the tangible things that I would never get this from a new building, because it has no history.
Mm-hmm.
There are no latent smells that are inside this. There was a teacher, Miss Humphreys. There's no name plaque for Miss Humphreys tucked in a corner that's been sitting there for 20 years like a missing treasure that you just got your hands on. Like, oh, it connects memory, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist in a new building. But I promise you, the memories that will stay with you. When I was at the Rosa Parks house where she grew up, we know the name Rosa Parks, how monumental, changed the world. Mrs. Parks had a closet with 3 nails in it. How many clothes are you going to hang in a closet with 3 nails? But it's a home her dad built for her. One outlet in that home. I look at my closet now, man. I search for hangers, right? But she had a closet with 3 nails. Those 3 nails created a woman who transformed the world.
Yeah.
Those 3 nails gave her the strength to sit when everybody else would have stood and moved. Those 3 nails gave her the ability to say, I'll be glad. I'll gladly be the face of this particular movement in the human condition.
Right, right. I'll say, Kwesi, we can certainly, definitely talk all day about Rosa Parks and like her long legacy of activism, including, her fight against sexual violence even before she sat down on their bus advocating for women. There's a book called The Dark End of the Street that details her activism beautifully. But I want to get back to this thing before we wrap. I'm thinking about your pyramid. So you had the trades at the bottom, which is how we connected. This filling this critical gap because buildings are coming down very quickly. New buildings are coming up, and what's getting lost are the people that know actually how to preserve these historic buildings. Then we talk about emerging technology on the same page there. What's at the top of the pyramid for you as we close out? Oh, okay.
Leadership.
All right.
You gotta have leaders. And the thing about leaders, that doesn't mean you got the PhD. Shout out to all those doctors, right? Hey, but that doesn't mean you got to have a PhD. One of my biggest leaders was Elizabeth Sims, who was in that video. Sitting at a meeting and watching her have passion for how to preserve her space, pouring resources and bringing resources to her. That was the most powerful thing because she had the passion and she had the project. We had the knowledge and the resources. We were able to help. So at the top is the leadership. And that means, in leadership, that's education, that's training, that's understanding how to talk to fundraisers, how to develop policy, right? Policy is huge. That component all the way at the top, that spans all levels. And if you do that, you'll find that the people that you'll bring to the table are not always the ones with the most money and the most degrees. The people that you'll be bringing to the table are often the people at the ground who know what it is to put a nail and a piece of wood together, and they can tell you what this nail and that wood means to their community. And in all of that, they're the ones who are the advocates who make everything else move.
Okay, you are absolutely right. Every big effort that we know about nationally, every national park, everything you can think of started at the local level, at the grassroots level, leveraging and utilizing that local expertise to build this groundswell of support. The strategy, you're right. At every level, it's needed, and it's going to take our field into the direction that needs to go at every level. So as we wrap up, Kwesi, let's think about how would you? We talked about the future. Anything else as we close out that you would like to share with our audience about what Tuskegee in particular has up next?
Man, I encourage your audience, come and visit. It is a mind-blowing space. As I said, these aren't buildings. Yeah, we walk inside them, but how many places can we say that we've been and we're standing in a curriculum? We're talking about an environment that they said Black people couldn't be educated. The easiest way to spell that myth is to say, while you say that, look at the building you're in. This building was built because we educated Black people, and the people who did the education were other Black people who got the knowledge, and then they came back and they educated. These buildings have been standing for over 130 years. To be in a place where the avant-garde of human society have walked these grounds, presidents of the United States, some of the richest men in the world, some of the most engaging social changers in the world They've literally walked those grounds. They've stood at that monument. They've been in some of these buildings. And so I just say I encourage folks to come experience what Tuskegee is, because it is it's a space that was created for all of humanity, and we're doing the work to preserve it. And so when you do come, make sure you say, you bring your working gloves and your clothes, because we got work for you now. And whatever works, hey, we can put you to work in some way that you can continue to contribute to this national treasure, this world treasure.
Well said, Kwesi. Kwesi, thank you for joining the conversation today. It's always good to see you and catch up with you.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Looking forward to our next time. So thank you all for joining the conversation today. And please come back next week, Tuesday at 11 o'clock for our next guest. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.